Welcome back. Chapter 13. We're moving right through. In Chapter 13, we're going to define small group communication. We're going to discuss the characteristics of small groups. We're going to explain the functions of small groups. We're going to compare and contrast styles of small groups, discuss the advantages and disadvantages of small groups. Most of our communication skills discussed in this book apply to the dyadic communication, meaning two-person, back and forth, kind of that. While those skills can be transferred to and used in small groups context, small groups are a little more complex than that, right? Because group interaction necessitates some adaptation and some additional skills. So small group communication refers to, and I'm sorry, I just noticed that I didn't bold this, so make sure we're paying attention. Small group communication refers to the interaction between three or more people who are connected through a common purpose, mutual influence, and a shared identity. You'll need to know that definition for the final. In this section, we'll learn about the characteristics, functions, and types of small groups. The characteristics of small groups. Different groups have different characteristics and serve different purposes, and can lead to positive, neutral, or negative experiences. While our interpersonal relationships primarily focus on relationship building, small groups are task-oriented. It's like a task that we must complete or a goal that we must complete. If we think about that, it starts in college, right? We are learning. We sometimes have to complete things with other people, groups, and then we continue that into our working career. So everyone typically uses this skill set at some point in their life. The size of small groups, there's no set number for an ideal small group. Remember, the minimum is 3, right? Because 2 people is a pair, it's a dyad, but 3 or more. But small groups can be, I've worked in small groups of 10 and 12, 15 even, within advertising context and other job type functions. When a group, though, grows beyond 15 to 20 members, it becomes difficult to call it a small group then, right? So my breakdown is literally, in most communication books, say around between 15 and 20 members. I go with the 15. Once you get more than 15 people involved in something, it becomes more than a small group. It's a large group. Okay? The analysis of the number of unique connections between the members of a small group shows that they are deceptively complex. We're going to talk more about that too. So let's take a 6-person group. There are 15 separate dyadic connections. And a 12-person group would have 66 potential dyadic connections. Because think about it, you've got 1-to-1, 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 all of those 1-to-1s, and then the whole of the group. When we double the number of group members, we more than double the number of connections. And that shows the network connection in small groups grow exponentially as membership increases, right? And remember, there's no real die-hard set upper limit of number of group members, but ultimately, like I said, most text will say 15 to 20, because when we're trying to accomplish a goal for a group, if we have too many members, the dyadic connections become too great. Group members feel overwhelmed, disconnected, and spend more time socializing than they actually do getting the problem solved, right? So internal and external influences affect group structure. In terms of internal influences, membership characteristics play a role within the initial group formation. For instance, a person who's well informed about the group's task or highly motivated as a group member may emerge as the group leader, right? We've seen this happen before in our lives. And then they set into motion internal decision-making processes, such as maybe recruiting new group members or assigning roles within the group. And that affects the structure of the group even more. Different members will also gravitate towards different roles within the group and will advocate for certain procedures that they like or feels comfortable to them, as well as certain courses of action over other types of courses of action. Because again, we're creatures of habit, and we know what, as we get older, what works within a group and what doesn't work within a group. External factors such as group size, task, and resources really affect group structure as well. Some groups have more control over external factors and sometimes they don't, right? The group structure is also formed through formal and informal network connections. Think about it. You may know these people already. You may have had a working relationship with them. And we think of that, tend to, hopefully, as a positive, but also we carry in our negative baggage, right? If we worked with someone before and we didn't like them, we carry that into the group as well. Diet Mountain Dew. The group also may be part of an organizational hierarchy, and then that would change how a group functions and how it's structured. Sometimes groups have very formal networks, formal rules, formal patterns. And those can be important in popping peas again. This can be important especially in larger groups and groups that have to report to external stakeholders. We'll talk more about external stakeholders in a minute. External stakeholders may influence the group's formal network, leaving the group little or no control over its own structure, meaning you're just assigned roles and then you have to work together. I've had that happen in advertising. It also happens in education. Conversely, groups that have more control over their informal network and groups that have connections within the individuals within the group that know each other and other group members, and also people outside the group, and maybe it's not quite as official, they tend to form their own structure, they tend to form their own rules, their own reporting methods. So think about it, a group member's friend or relative may be able to secure a space to hold a fundraiser at a discounted rate at a venue, right? And that helps the group execute its goal, achieve its task, but yet they're not really formally a part of the group. Both networks are important because they help facilitate the information exchange, whether they're informal or formal, within that group, and extend the group's reach outside of itself to achieve other resources, pull in other resources. Size and structure, like I said earlier, affect the communication within the group. In terms of size, the more people in the group, the more issues with scheduling and coordination of communication. It's just a natural thing. Time is an important resource in most group interactions, and it's a resource that's most strained. We're all busy, so when we think about volunteering for something or being a part of something, a group, our time is affected, and we have to work with other people's time as well. The structure of a group can increase or decrease the flow of information. I'll dive deeper into that as we go through the lecture. Reachability refers to the way in one group member is connected or isn't connected to the other group members. For instance, sometimes we have the circle is tighter, or you have one person that's not as involved, right? Not as connected, not friends with the rest of the group, and it's up to you to bring them into the group. If you look at the circle group structure in 13.1.1, it shows that each group member is connected to 2 other group members. So the circle's on the left-hand side. So you see Winston has Eric on one side and Callie on the other. And then you've got Bill down here. Bill's got Callie and Stephanie. And then Stephanie's got Bill and Eric. All right, and that's a circle group. Whereas the wheel is the other pattern, and everyone's connected in a different way, right? And Tara's the most reachable. Tara's kind of the point person. And if Tara's the one with the most experience or most expertise in the task that needs to get done, or if she becomes the leader, it's kind of a natural process. And if you think about a wheel pattern, Philip's not going to work with Shadow very often unless Tara's involved. Or Shadow's not going to work with Philip very often. Or Shadow may not work with Tallulah very often unless Tara's involved. That's the downfall of the wheel pattern. It takes a strong center, a strong leader to make sure everyone's communicating and getting the work done. When we look at group structures, we can make some assumptions about how the communication happens within them, right? The wheel is a centralized structure, meaning Tara, as we talked about earlier, is essential for the group's success. But the circle, as we talked about first, doesn't work that way, right? It's decentralized communication, meaning people talk amongst themselves and work out the problem solution as a group, maybe better, you hope. You know, centralized groups typically will come to those group consensus better than a wheel. All right. They generally will solve the problems a little quicker. Decentralized groups, they're the best at solving complex problems. Centralized groups like the wheel, the person with the most connections, again, is most likely to be the leader of the group and talks to the other groups and serves as a gatekeeper. But in complex tasks, that person could be overwhelmed by the burden of processing and sharing so much information with every group member, right? There, you know, we can create a problem with communication. One person holding too much information can be a bad thing. It may not be communicated outwardly to the rest of the group. Circle structure is more likely to emerge in groups where collaboration is a goal and one person doesn't have all of the information, right? And also when the course of action isn't required under sharp time constraints. When a person who initiated a group has the most expertise in regards to the task, they typically can be a leader still in a decentralized group, but equal access to the information lessens the hierarchy process, gets rid of gatekeeping, and helps everyone work together to form a better consensus. Small groups exhibit interdependence, not independence, meaning they share a common purpose and a common fate, meaning they need to get a goal solved, a problem solved, and it's either up to them to succeed or fail, right? If the actions of one or two group members lead the group from deviating from or not even achieving the purpose, like not solving the problem, all group members are affected. Conversely, if the actions of only a few of the group members lead to success, then all the group members still benefit. Now, this is a major contributor in why college students dislike group assignments. And I love group assignments, but since I teach online, It is complicated to set that up. Okay. And the reason many of those students, oh, it's so funny because most of the time the students that do not like group assignments are my students that are doing the best in the class by themselves. And the reason they don't like it is because they feel a loss of control, because some of their work is dependent on others, right? This concern's valid. Their grades might suffer. I told you the story of how I took over a group in an architecture class where I'm not even an architecture major. It was one of my electives. And I took over the group and I did the group project basically and handed everybody, like, here's your slide. Here's some talking points in bullet points. They're the architecture students. They can talk about this. I took all the photos, I put all the PowerPoint together, I did all the things, including some music, and then I even had food brought in from the culture we were talking about, which was the Ottoman Empire, so Persian culture. So I did all of that to make sure I got a good grade, and honestly, they got a good grade. That was the secondary purpose, but I knew I was 40, almost 41 years old at that point, and I was counting on this class as one of my last electives to graduate with. So it was ultra important to me. I'm not discounting the importance to others. Now, is that the way we should communicate? No. I learned from that. It was a mistake. It was a fail on my part. By the way, we got a great grade. We got a 98. But still, I put a lot of work on me in a time where I was really busy. I was working full time, had a family, trying to make sure I had aging grandparents. I was trying to keep it all together. So I could have and should have allowed the group to try to figure it out themselves, muddle through it, have the meetings, organize, assign tasks to different group members, and just move through it, right? Like a typical group. But I chose to be bullheaded and make it difficult on myself, and ultimately alienate myself from many of those students. So when we think about group meetings, again, interdependence, we're all in this together, right? We're connected to this. We need to find a solution. And that creates problems because of time constraints, right? That was why I took over that, because I knew that my time, my meeting time to meet was going to be much less available than many of the students might have, right? Because I worked full time. I had a family. I'm trying to get through school, so I knew that it was going to be more difficult. And that is one of the biggest problems when we think about the interdependence function of a group. Group members can't always attend meetings, right? Also, sometimes group members don't participate in the meetings. And that can be frustrating, especially when your job or grade depends on it, or even your reputation in a field is partially dependent on their work. So it's ultimately a responsibility of a group leader to hold group members accountable for their actions. When we think about shared identity, groups have a shared identity. Now, sometimes groups have a charter or a mission statement or vision statements that lay out that whole identity of a group, right? But also the identity is around that shared goal or accomplishment that they need to achieve, right? Now, some of us may be in a group that's called in and then disbanded at times, and then when there's more problems, called back in, right? I think about my father was a deacon in the church. They went into business meetings pretty regularly, at least monthly, once a month, right? So, and it didn't mean that on the other 3 weeks they weren't trying to solve church-related problems. So, others of us form a group. We're in a group. We're in the group to solve a problem, and then the group is disbanded. I think about my stepdaughter, she is in a sorority. So, I mean, the sorority has a mission statement, charter statements. It has special slogans, phrases they use, handshakes, I don't know, maybe. Clothing is definitely a thing. They all have to matchy-matchy. And for someone who's very independent, that's why I never joined a sorority. Well, I wouldn't have joined a sorority. I never joined a fraternity because I'm very independent and I'll choose my own clothing. I can do my own thing. But I know some people, that's an important part of growing up and moving through. So when we think about fraternities, sororities, or even something as simple as a family reunion, having matching clothing makes it special. Doing certain things in a certain way, reiterating social experiences, talking about the past, events that they've done together, like if it's a group, right? All those are very important to the shared identity of a group. The key element of the formation of that shared identity within the group is the establishment of the in-group as opposed to the out-group. Let's talk about that. The in-group, the degree in which some members of the in-group go to is extreme, right? They are the ones that organize the matching t-shirts. They're the ones planning things. They're the ones that are getting the events together for the sorority or fraternity. They're the in-group. But yet, sometimes people at the family reunion show up and they don't have the matching t-shirt, or they're friends of people in the sorority that show up for an event. They're the out group, right? Out group. But yet they're all part of this event and they all have some sort of cohesion and work together towards that goal. So let's talk about, why do we join groups? I mentioned a little bit earlier. We join groups out of choice or service, right? Usually choice or service. Those are typically the reason. Service meaning there's a problem, we must solve it. Choice is, hey, I joined a fraternity, I joined a sorority, I joined a church, I joined, you name it, right? The photography club at school. We may be drawn to a group because we admire some of the people within the group, that in-group within the group, and we want to be a part of that. And whether we're conscious of it or not, our identities and self-concepts are built on groups with which we can identify with. You know, I think about groups I have previously been a part of. I've been a part of photography groups. I was part of the school newspaper in my schools that I attended. I shot video for the school television and did radio clips and podcasts for the radio side. Those are groups that I was a part of. I never joined a fraternity. Wasn't my thing. I said photography club, I think. Other groups I've been a part of, NRA, because I believe in my constitutional right, but I also believe that I'm not going to be obnoxious about my constitutional right to carry. Just like I'm very fervent about my freedom of speech. So I've joined a few groups over time. Very much fan-based groups like St. Louis Cardinals fan-base group, St. Louis Blues fan-base group. You know, I didn't choose, interestingly enough, I'm one of those oddballs that didn't choose to ever go back for any reunions in high school, because that was a choice. I guess my high school, I didn't feel like it would have been the high school I wanted to go to. And so because of that, I think I just chose to not participate in any of my high school reunions. And I think some people might find that odd, especially, just never went back because it wasn't a big deal. I'm still in contact with friends from high school, but like it just wasn't a big deal. So I chose not to be a part of a group, and we can choose not to be a part of a group. So as we talked about, why do we join groups? We join groups because they function to help us meet instrumental, interpersonal, and identity needs. That's the actual definition of why we join groups. All right, let's talk about instrumental needs. Groups have long served the instrumental needs of humans, helping us in the most basic elements of survival since ancient humans evolved. Groups helped humans survive by providing security and protection through increased numbers and access to resources. Today, groups are rarely a matter of life and death, right? But they still serve an important instrumental function. So think about groups like labor unions. Oh, I totally didn't even think about that. When I was first going to college, I actually worked for a grocery store for a brief moment in time, and I was part of a labor union. I didn't really have a choice. My dues were taken out, but it helped me because we have a higher rate of living, right? Pay increases, health benefits. I actually had health benefits. So that was one of those instrumental needs moments where a group helped me with my instrumental needs. Think about interpersonal needs. Group members meet their interpersonal needs by giving us access to inclusion. I mentioned that earlier. Being part of that in-group, right? Control and support. In terms of inclusion, people have a fundamental drive to be part of a group and create and maintain social bonds. We want friends, right? And humans have always lived and worked in small groups. Family and friendship groups, shared interest groups, and activity groups provide us with a sense of belonging and have been included in us reaching that in-group within some of those groups, if not all of them, right? People join groups because they want to have control over decision-making process or influence an outcome of a group. Sometimes people join a group like the Rainbow Coalition or AFL, or we would join ACLU. We might join, any number of, again, fraternities, sororities, right? But they also join sometimes for political reasons, which is why I brought up some of those early ones, because they believe that they're helping people. I once was part of a group in my first college experience who helped students with disabilities. We were trying to make sure that everyone was included in our events, had an ability to participate in events, and really enjoy their life as a college student. So, when we think about those kind of things, that's important. Conversely, some people join groups in order to be controlled because they don't like making decisions or being a leader, and instead want to just follow along. And then groups meet our interpersonal needs. And we join into groups because when we like someone, we're drawn in towards a group or they may belong to, right? Groups also provide support for others and from others in ways that they can help each other. We think about therapy groups or even study groups. Think about like being a cancer survivor, a group that helps provide emotional support, helps provide knowledge. And so, like I said earlier, a study group means instrumental needs as well, but it also meaning it helps us get knowledge to pass a class. But it also creates fulfillment in interpersonal by being with others who are maybe struggling or maybe not struggling trying to help others in that class, right, to achieve those goals. Groups meet identity needs as well. We look for things that we can belong to, that we identify with, that we want to be a part of. I told you earlier, the National Rifle Association was one of the ones that I have been a part of for years. I also have joined various freedom of speech groups throughout my lifetime, because I feel like that's another constitutional right that's very important. Think about NOW, National Organization for Women, because they want to further women's rights, right? Like I told you about, disabled students, they formed that organization and I joined it. Yes, I was the editor of the newspaper, but I thought it was an important thing. I have a second cousin who is Down syndrome. I have another second cousin who had developmental disorders, probably would be now on the broad scale of autism, right? And I used to take him to baseball games. He was my plus one many times to go when I had season tickets, and we would go to the baseball games together. And we were technically, motivated, the people that joined that group for the students with disabilities. We were motivated not necessarily because we may have the problem, but we understood that this was a real issue that we need to address, and we need to make sure people are included within the college experience, not excluded. Religious groups sometimes help us reach our identity needs as well. I mentioned earlier that my dad was a deacon. So, that's a part of this identity, who we are. The prestige of a group could rub off on us, right? We want to join a group because we believe it will make us look good. Sometimes achievements can enhance within the group, help us enhance our self-esteem, add to our reputation, right? A person may take many tests to become part of Mensa, just so I can show off my high IQ. It's, some people do that. I don't understand exactly, but that's neither here nor there. Some people join sports teams, right? Intercollegiate sports, or professional organizations within, honor societies, things like that, right? Think about it, even a person who played the oboe in high school might want to join a community band in order to continue to play and be part of music. I was part of theater groups over time because it was something that I enjoyed. When we think about the types of small groups, there are so many different types. And we're going to cover some of the more routine small groups because, again, this is one of those things where communication in this way, goodness gracious, I could teach probably a whole class in group communication. So when we think about small groups, typically they're task-oriented or relationship-oriented groups. Task-oriented groups solve problems, promote a cause, generate ideas, get information out. In those groups, they could be study groups, community groups, interactions, decisions are primarily evaluated based on the quality of the final product or outcome. Task groups are typically production-based, discussion-based, or problem-solving based. Groups faced with task or production tasks are asked to produce something tangible from their group interaction, such as a report, designed for a playground, maybe a musical performance, or even a fundraiser event. Groups with discussion tasks are asked to talk about something, right? These type groups include support groups for people who have HIV, AIDS, cancer, support groups, book club, A group for new fathers could be part of that. Groups faced with problem-solving tasks have to devise a course of action to meet specific needs. These groups usually include production and or discussion component, but the end goal isn't necessarily a tangible product or shared social reality through discussion. Instead, the end goal is a well thought out idea, pure and simple. Task-oriented groups are required to hone problem-solving skills and accomplish goals. And the structure of these groups is far more rigid than most relational-oriented groups. Now, relational-oriented groups are formed to promote interpersonal connections, and they're more focused on the quality of interaction that contributes to the well-being of group members. When we think about, that's where we're talking about, okay, cancer survivors, things like that. Decision making is directed at strengthening or repairing relationships rather than completing discrete tasks or debating specific ideas or courses of action. AA, that's another one. All groups include task relational elements, so it's best to think of these orientations as two ends of a continuum rather than a mutually exclusive end goal. Although a family unit works together daily to accomplish tasks like getting the kids ready for school, and friendships groups may help plan a surprise party for one of its members, right? Their primary and most meaningful interactions are still relationships. Relational. All right? Some groups are based solely on interpersonal relationships. Our family and our friends are considered primary groups that we're part of, right? Long-lasting groups, I've also heard them called. And those are formed based on relationships and include significant others. But the small groups in which we interact most frequently, but while they are the groups that we interact with most frequently, they don't always perform solid task-based stuff as a quantifiable means. They're more about keep maintaining relationship, growing relationship. They are the basis of our society and form individual social realities, right? Kinship networks provide us important support early in our lives and meet psychological and safety needs. Those are essential for survival. So we still do have a bit of that within our human race, right? They meet higher order needs such as social and self-esteem needs. And when people do not interact with their biological family, whether voluntarily or involuntary, they establish fictive kinship networks, which are composed of people who are not biologically related to them, but fulfill the family roles and help provide the same support just the same. We also interact with many secondary groups, which are characterized by less frequent face-to-face interactions, less emotional and relational communication, and more task-related communication than primary groups. While we're more likely to participate in secondary groups based on self-interest, our primary group interactions are more reciprocal. We may join groups because of a shared interest or need, like photography club, right? Groups based on shared interest include social groups, leisure groups, such as a group of independent film buffs, science fiction fans, bird watchers, right? Some groups form to meet the needs of individuals or particular group members. Examples of groups that meet the needs of individuals include study groups we talked about earlier, or support groups. I don't feel like we really got to keep drilling this down. This is pretty straightforward, right? When we talk about small groups, there's so many different small groups that have always been around, and new small groups are being added on a regular basis. We've already learned that other groups primarily are formed to complete a task, right? The tasks-oriented groups members are typically loyal and dedicated to the task and other group members. In professional and civic contests, the word has been popularized as a means of drawing positive connotations. Connotations such as high-spirited, cooperative, hardworking, right? Those phrases can be linked to groups, not just individuals. And what we found through the study of small groups is successful teams have clear and inspiring shared goals, a results-driven structure, competent team members, a collaborative climate, high standards for performance, external support and recognition, and ethical and accountable leadership. Increasingly, small groups and teams are engaging in more virtual interaction through technology such as Zoom and other FaceTime, those things. Some virtual groups may complete their task without ever physically face-to-face seeing other members. And that's kind of crazy to think about, but we do live in that space. Many times in my career, I've had to reach out and have meetings, even because geographically teammates, team members, and even potential clients were miles and miles away. So technology is a great tool to allow us to broaden our groups. The advantages and disadvantages of small groups. Advantages of small groups include shared decision making, shared resources, synergy, and exposure to diversity. It's within the small groups that most of our decisions that guide our country, our local laws, state laws, and influence even family decisions are made. We live in a democratic society, and we are able to participate in the decision-making process as citizens. Groups also help making decisions involving judgment calls that may have ethical implications or the potential to negatively affect people, right? Individuals making such high-stakes decisions in a vacuum could have negative consequences, lead to feedback, lack of input, questioning from others. Whereas if we do this in a group, we're going to have more ideas, more alternatives. Group members can help expand our social networks, and that provides us with more resources. I mentioned synergy a bit ago. I just realized that I didn't define it. So synergy refers to the potential for gains in performance or heightened quality of interaction because of team members complementing each other. And I don't mean, oh, you look nice today. I meant literally their skill sets complementing the other skill sets or member characteristics, meaning the team is better than the sum of its parts. Because of synergy, the final group product is better many times than what any individual could have produced alone. For example, I used to participate with Model UN and help coordinate one time a International Food Day for all the students that attended Maryville University, where I went to school. As a group, we organized teams of national and international students for each country represented by a Maryville student. And the groups organized to procure and prepare a meal from their country. The U.S. national students mostly served as transportation to the stores, help plan the event, help set up the event, and clean up afterwards, as well as being judges for the food. We ended up with a very successful event that would not have been possible without the synergy created by our collective group and all of its members. It was a success not because of me. It was a success because it was well thought out, well planned. well organized, and well executed. The members of this group were also exposed to international diversity that helped enrich all of our experiences. And that's an added bonus of group communication. You can learn. Participating in groups can also increase our exposure to diversity and broaden our perspectives, as I just mentioned in my incident. Groups can also vary because of the diversity of its membership group, right? And it helps us increase or expand our social networks, meaning have more people to interact with and learn more about other cultures and more identities, more people. Since group members work together for a common goal, their shared identification with the task or group can give people with diverse backgrounds a sense of commonality, right? That they may not have otherwise. All right. Even when group members share cultural identities, diversity and experience as well as opinion within the group can be broadened perspectives as alternative ideas are presented and opinions are challenged and or defended, right? My example earlier of that event brought together the potential for synergy and diversity. People who are more introverted or avoid group communication and voluntarily distance themselves from groups or are rejected from groups risk losing opportunities to learn more about others and even themselves. One person can be just as effective as group of people many times, right? If we think about a situation where someone with highly skilled, specialized skills, right, or knowledge about something on how to get something done, they effectively can do the work quickly without a group. So this could be a disadvantage, right? Meaning they might just take the show and run with it, right? Like I did with that group project for architecture. Or they could be frustrated. The person with all the knowledge could be frustrated by actively participating in a group and having to work through all the banter and the other things and hearing wrong ideas and then having to correct them. It could be difficult. And that's one of the disadvantages of small groups. Also, communication of the group can present interpersonal challenges. A common problem could be planning, coordinating the group meetings because of our busy schedule, right? Also, the independence of group members can create disadvantages. Certain group members may take advantage of the anonymity of the group and engage in social loafing, and we'll talk more about social loafing later in the chapter, but that means just being lazy, right? They contribute less than the rest of the members of the group, or even far less than they would if they were working alone. Social loafers expect that no one will notice their behaviors or that others will pick up their slack. And unfortunately, that's one of those disadvantages of small groups. When we think about small group development, 13.2, they have to start somewhere, right? Even established groups go through changes as members come and go, and as tasks are completed, or started and completed, right? The relationships change over time as well. In this section, we're going to talk about the stages of group development, which are forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. As with most models of communication phenomena, though, we'll order the stages and discuss them separately, but they're not always experienced in a linear fashion. Some groups never experience all 5 stages, right? And sometimes they might drop back to a stage more than one time. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Forming stage, new group members come on board, right? You're forming the group, starting this thing up from scratch perhaps, or maybe just restarting the group. Groups return to the forming stage as group members come and go over the lifespan of the group. There may not be much uncertainty when one or two new people join a group, as there is when the group first formed, but there's still a bit of forming that still takes place even though you only have a couple new members. And that's because interpersonal bonds haven't really yet been formed. When we have new people join the group, they may be unfamiliar with the group totally. They may not know the purpose at hand for the group. They definitely may not know the other members of the group, right? And those create uncertainty for both the current group members and the new people. The early stage of role negotiation begins, and group members begin to determine the goals for the group and establish the rules and norms. Group cohesion also begins to form at this time. Group cohesion refers to the commitment of the members to the purpose of the group and the degree of attraction among the members of the group, meaning how much they like each other. Cohesion that begins in this stage sets the group trajectory, and it's influenced by the group members' feelings about each other and their purpose or task. Groups with a voluntary membership may exhibit high levels of optimism of what the group can accomplish in this stage. Although that optimism can be motivating, unrealistic expectations usually come from this, and those tend to lead to disappointment, making it important for group members to balance optimism with realism. Many factors influence the forming stage of the group development as it plays out. The personalities of a group, the skills that members bring, the resources available to the group's size, the group's charge, and all contribute to the creation of the early tone and climate within the group. For example, more dominant personalities may take over early, right? And they'll jump into those leadership roles. That can lead to subsequent decisions that may or may not be in the best interest of the group. In terms of size, the bonding that begins in the forming stage may be difficult when the number of people within the group prevents every member from having one-on-one connections with every other member of the group. In larger groups, also, dominant members assert themselves as leaders, build smaller coalitions within the group, and then move the group in a trajectory towards potential conflict, and we'll talk more about that coming up. Now, second stage storming. Give me a second. I'm still kind of fighting through soreness in the throat and cold-like symptoms, but not really cold. All right. So, storming. At the storming stage of group development, conflicts emerge as people begin to perform their various roles. They're trying to get their ideas heard, and they're negotiating where they fit in within the group structure. Uncertainty is very much present in this stage, just like it was in the forming stage, but it begins to give way as people begin to occupy specific roles and a specific purpose within the group. They start to understand the rules of the group. Therefore, the norms of the group become more clear. Conflict can still develop here, though, as some group members aren't satisfied with the role that they have, or they think others are making too large of decisions or whatever. Those can create conflict, right? If a leader begins to emerge or is assigned during the forming stage, some members might feel that the leader is imposing their will on the group, right? So we're going to learn more in our section about group leadership. Leaders need to expect some degree of resentment from others who wanted to be leaders. They're going to have some interpersonal conflicts with people within the group. Or sometimes some people just have general issues with being led in general. They're used to doing it their own way. Although the word storming and concept of conflict can have negative connotations, conflict actually can be positive and productive. Just like storms replenish the water supplies and make the crops grow, storming can lead to group growth. Conflict is inevitable and will be experienced by nearly every group. A group that gets stuck in the storming stage will not have much success in completing its task or mission, right? So influences from outside the group can also affect the conflict within the storming stage. Interpersonal conflicts that predate the forming of the group may distract the group from more productive ideas. Or task-oriented conflict can happen here, and that can create problems. But it also can be healthy for the group and increase the quality of ideas, the decision making, and ultimately the output of the group if handled properly. Conflict is always always has a potential for positive. It's up to us to make it happen. When we think about the norming stage of group development, so practices and expectations of the group are solidified. Oh goodness, I gotta get going. This leads to more stability and productivity and cohesion within the group. Group norms are behaviors that become routine, and they don't have to be explicitly taught or stated. In short, group norms are what helps set the tone for the group members and what they ought to do and how they ought to behave and how they can get to that solution. It's important because norming stage leads us into brainstorming, getting ideas, getting solutions to the problem. So the norming stage is a essential part of a group process. Also within norming stage, you're going to talk about rules, regulations, potentially. So when we think about that, it's important. Then, which leads us to the next stage. Once we've settled our differences and moved through and started to brainstorm, started to actually come up with solutions, we're in the performing stage. The performing stage is really where the group all works together in small and large ways to come up with real ideas, real experiences, real solutions to problems. Synergy is a positive that can help group members to exceed their expectations. Remember, the sum is better than the parts. We can all help each other be better in this performing stage, coming up with a solution. This is where we come up with the solution. This is where we solve the problem ultimately. And then that leads us to the last stage, potentially, which is the adjourning stage. The group has completed its goal, or perhaps group membership declines to a level that it's no longer feasible to keep the group up, right? So then we close out. And in this stage, we really reach out to the people we enjoyed working with in the group, and they become interpersonal relationships that we carry on. Ultimately, this is the last stage of a group. The solution's been found, or time has expired and we never got to a solution. But we break up the group and everyone learns from each other in that experience. Let's talk about the social group dynamics. I realize what time it is. We're closing in on 1 hour, and we've got, goodness gracious, 30 slides more. Small group dynamics. Anytime people come together, new dynamics are put into place that change the previous dynamic. So we have to think about small groups are always in a state of flux, always in a state of change. As new members are added, our old members go away, right? So keep that in mind. That there's always a bit of conflict and there's always a bit of learning, always. Let's talk about conflict and cohesion first. Let's talk about positives, and then we'll talk about potential negatives. When something is cohesive, it sticks together. So when a group has good cohesion, they're sticking together. The group climate refers to the enduring tone and quality of the group interaction within the group, okay, over time. So when we think about cohesion and climate, we can examine two different types of cohesion, task-based and social. Task cohesion refers to the commitment of group members to the purpose and activities of the group, whereas social cohesion refers to the attraction and liking between those group members, right? And there has to be a good balance of that within every successful group. I'm not going to dive deeply into this. You can read the slides, but because for the sake of time, I'm just realizing that we're still 20. We're just now 20 slides from being done. So that said, group cohesion and climate benefits the group in many ways and can be assessed through specific group behaviors and/or characteristics. Groups with an appropriate level of cohesion can set goals easily, exhibit a high commitment to achieving the purpose of the group, and they are more productive. They have fewer attendance issues. Group members who are willing to stick together with a group during times of difficulty. Having satisfied group members who identify with the group, promote the group, and defend the group, and have members who are willing to listen to each other and offer support and/or constructive criticism, as well as experience less anger and tension throughout the group. When we think about cohesion and climate of a group and creating that positive group experience, since group climate is affected by member satisfaction of the group, we've got to keep people happy and high morale, right? Participation. Group members feel better when they're included in the discussion and part of the functioning of the group. Messaging. Confirming messages can build relational dimension within the group. Clear, organized communication and relevant messages can help task dimension within the group, meaning everybody feels better, everybody understands. Feedback. Positive and constructive and relevant feedback is essential to positive group climate. Equity. All the members of the group need to feel important, special, and a part of the group. Clear and accepted roles. Everybody must accept their roles of whatever they are within the group, and while they may not be 100% satisfied with that, they must accept it and be willing to participate, as well as, again, member motivation is activated by their connection to the group, the relevance of the group's goals or purposes, and their commitment to achieving them. Group cohesion and climate is demonstrated through symbolic convergence. Symbolic convergence refers to the sense of community or group consciousness that develops in a group through non-task related communication, such as social, like stories, jokes, all those things that make it kind of fun to be part of a group. In any group, you can tell when symbolic convergence is occurring by observing how people share their stories, their fantasies, and how the group members react to them, right? And I don't mean fantasies in like some sort of weird way. I just mean like the idea of what this group can accomplish, right? Sorry, there's duplication of that slide. Group socialization refers to the process of teaching and learning the norms, the roles, the rules, and expectations of a group through group interaction, and therefore exhibiting group behavior. It's essential, as we talked about earlier, to have a good group that everybody's got to buy into the rules and the norms. All right, getting there. When we think about group socialization, it's the process of teaching and learning those norms, right? So we want to make sure that everyone does that. Information exchange during socialization can be broken down into two categories: technical and social knowledge. Think about it, that's pretty straightforward. Technical is about getting the task done. Social is about creating group bonds and enjoying the group experience. Socialization includes or continues after initial membership through enforcement of rules and norms. When someone deviates from the rules and norms and are corrected, this serves as a reminder to the other members about the group's function and how serious this is, right? And even in those moments, you can still make it fun, create a path forward for the people who offended the rules, right? Broke the rules, and make sure that you're still having good social commitment. You don't want to have a group so rigid that if the rules are broken once or twice, you're booting people out. Group pressures. Let's talk about group pressures. There's pressures within groups that can be positive or negative, and so we're going to run through those. Conformity. It forces us to feel somewhat similar and not act out of turn and not be too different than the group's rules and norms. All right, so there's got to be a level of conformity. External pressures form groups' policies and or rewards or punishments as well, so we need to think about that. Deviations can lead ultimately to expulsion of groups, and that's up to the people involved in the group to make those things happen. Remember also, conformity pressures can stem from how a group is viewed out in the outside world, right? In the world around us, how is that group viewed? So that can create pressure. Sometimes groups can be so tough, so driven to finding a solution to a problem, that it can drive up the stress level of the individual members. And there have been instances where people committed suicide because they could not handle the pressures of groups. So let's not let our groups be so rigid, so structured, so strong and unyielding that we're causing harm to others. Groupthink, it's another important part of communication within group we need to talk about. Groupthink is a negative more than it is a positive. And it's a negative phenomenon characterized by a lack of critical evaluation to the proposed ideas or courses of action that results from high levels of cohesion, and high conformity pressures. That's where coercion starts to come into play. So high levels of cohesion, meaning that's a positive. We're all thinking a lot alike, right? And we want to come up with things that work well for others, but then we're conforming our ideas. We're falling into coercion, meaning we're all trying to think so much like each other that we're really not getting the best thought process out. So groupthink isn't always the best. To avoid groupthink, divvy up the responsibilities between group members so that decision-making power isn't in the hands of one or two. Track the contributions of group members in a way that each person's input and output is recorded so it can be expressed, discussed, and evaluated. Encourage and reward the expression of minority or dissenting opinions. Allow members to submit ideas prior to discussion so that opinions aren't swayed by members or saying it publicly. We want to create lists of ideas, and sometimes when we're in a group and we're afraid to open our mouths to say an idea because we think others might not like it, right? They might hate it, and we don't want that negative communication. So you might want to have everybody writes things down and puts it on paper and submits it without their names on it so that everybody's ideas can be evaluated and looked at and reviewed in a meaningful way, and it'll help you avoid groupthink. Question the major decision-making process, look for any weaknesses and potential negative consequences to any competing decisions. Play the devil's advocate role, meaning question. If we think we've got too easy of a plan, too good of a plan, too early, we might need to look at that and start poke holes in it. And in that, we can come up with a better plan overall. Have the decisions reviewed by an outside party that was not involved in the decision-making process, and have a reflection period. Come up with ideas, think on it, ruminate, and then come back, meet again. Now, let's talk about group conflict. Group conflict is a necessity, and it happens in all groups. I'm not saying it's positive, but it can be turned into a positive. We tend to look at group conflict as a negative, but in reality, we can spin it into a positive. We can learn from it. There are three Main types of conflict within groups: procedural, substantive, and interpersonal. So when we think about procedural conflict, it emerges from disagreements or trouble with the mechanics of group operations. This is purely procedural, meaning they don't like the rules, don't like sole power in the hands of one. There could be a lot of things. We want to have a vote, we want to have democracy in this group. Okay, that's procedural. Substantive conflict focuses on group members' differing beliefs, attitudes, values, or ideas in regards to the purpose or task that we're trying to solve. And procedural conflict, again, leaders who make final decisions without substantive conflict, without talking about problems, and just move the meeting on. We're just going to go with this decision because I feel it's the right decision and I'm the leader. Okay? That's not a way to lead. Group members need to voice their concerns and be heard. Interpersonal conflict emerges from conflict between individual members of the group. This could have started before the group was ever formed. It could have been started by one incident during the group meetings. Could be someone thinking that they're not, one member is not taking the group seriously, and then they creates interpersonal conflict, right? Passive-aggressive behavior is another sign of interpersonal conflict within a group, and it is exhibited often, unfortunately. Look for the signs of passive-aggressive behavior and start to create a real dialogue and real communication. Also, there can be primary and secondary tensions. Sometimes people take longer to get warmed up in a group as far as get to know people and then voice their opinions. So again, we need to take those into consideration. Please read through this section. It looks like I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to be able to cover everything. Like I said, I could teach a whole class on this for a whole semester and help us be better at group communication. When we think about managing conflict within small groups, sometimes third-party mediation could become necessary. I really dive into how we can address each individual role here. Please read through this, and I apologize. I mean, we're at we're at an hour and 15 minutes now. So again, I'm trying to move you through this material, but take the moments to read these PowerPoints at least and get some information out of this. We're going to talk, some of your homework deals with conflict. So again, you're going to really want to read through this section and then bounce anything off me to make sure if you have any questions, so make sure you're getting the material correctly. When we think about managing conflict within small groups, we need to clarify the issues at hand and we need to get to the root of the problem. Be mindful that perception leads us to punctuate interactions differently. So one person can feel like things went fine and the other person think it all disaster, right? Create a positive discussion climate by encouraging and rewarding active listening. Discuss needs rather than solutions. Set boundaries. Engage in gatekeeping at times to keep unproductive interactions like tangents or personal attacks from happening, and use we language instead of I language. Don't forget, conflict in a group is typical and it can be a positive as long as we treat it with some of the guidelines I threw out here towards the end of the class, and I apologize for not being able to read through all of them, but it's up to us to manage that. It's up to us to find a way to move through it. Remember, the longer we let conflict go on, or if it's poorly handled, it leads to decreased cohesiveness, which can affect the group's performance and lead us to maybe not even completing the task at hand. In Chapter 14, I'm going to dive deeper into leadership roles and how we can be active leaders in helping create effective communication and move past the ideas or problems in conflict. Communicate clearly have voices heard, and make changes ultimately. Because many times what we'll find is in conflict, we will find out that, hey, what we were doing doesn't work for everybody, and we need to make this work more for everyone so that we can truly get good communication, good ideas, and good problem solving skills. All right, that said, please check out your homework. Again, chapter 13 homework, let's get that completed. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'm here for you. Have a great day, and I'll see you in chapter 14.